Welcome you all to the day 2 online FDP on trends in MEMS and nanotechnology. Today for the morning session, we have with us Dr. Sri Ganesh Prabhu, Professor from Department of Condensed Matter Physics and Material Science, TIFR Bombay, who will be giving us a session on the topic nanophotonics and terahertz. I now request Nana to introduce our today's resource person, Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Over to you, Nana.
A very good morning to one and all. I, Nanaji, on behalf of Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, glad to introduce our resource person, Dr. Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Dr. Prabhu did his BSc in Physics from Mumbai University and MSc in Physics from Pune University and PhD in Physics from Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai. He did his postdoctorate at Emory University, Atlanta. Dr. Prabhu is now working as Associate Professor of Physics at the Department of Condensed Matter Physics and Material Science in TIFR, Mumbai. Dr. Prabhu initially worked on ultra-fast phenomenon in semiconductors and heterostructures using ultra-short lasers and worked on terahertz spectroscopy using sub-picosecond lasers. Currently, he is working on ultra-fast carrier dynamics in materials using terahertz spectroscopy. He has more than 45 papers in reputed international journals and several articles in many magazines. He has published more than 70 papers in conferences and has given many invited talks. Apart from this, some of his research interests are in the fields like ultrafast time resolved phenomena in materials, terahertz spectroscopy of materials, metamaterials, high field terahertz, near field terahertz microscopy. We are honored to have you online, sir. Welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Okay. So thank you very much and good morning to all the students and professors who are all participating in this. So I first wish to thank all the members of this ALWA Institute of Technology and Engineering for giving me this opportunity and inviting me here. Thanks to Professor Richard Pinto who has been mentoring this and who has been also a very driving force behind this research activity there at IICT Bangalore. And also thanks to Manjunath and Dr. Anish Jain and all others who have taken so many efforts to organize this. It's a great event. So let me thank all of you and also wish you all the best for all the things. And let me begin. So I'm just switching off my video for the saving of the bandwidth, and I will directly start. So I hope that my first slide is visible to you, to all of you. And then I'm from basically ultrafast spectroscopy laboratory, which is also called fundamental optics and terahertz nanophotonics lab. So that is why the nomenclature is FOTON. You can also have a look at our website. So basically today what I will talk, this talk will be roughly split into two parts. One is the nanophotonics and the other part is terahertz spectroscopy. And I will show you how they are all linked together. So before we begin, nanophotonics is very small part of the overall big thing, what is the photonics. So let me give you a flavor of all these things and you will see how things are evolved so roughly for about an hour I will give you a lot of new ideas which are involved into the photonics and nanophotonics, plasmonics, etc. And then we will go to the terahertz spectroscopy part, which is what we do. And if any one of you are interested in collaborations, we are always welcome. So let me start by saying what is electronics. So all of you are already familiar with electronics and you are also familiar with the word photonics. So beginning of this 20th century, it was all for electrons because that's where electrons were basically electrons. So basically what happened was these electrons basically dominated the progress in the beginning of the 20th century. and a lot of new devices were invented, and different designs were made, and basically that developed electronics, and that was actually spanning many things. And towards the end of this 20th century, lasers and many other light related phenomena were invented. Those devices were invented, and then it started getting dominated by the photon. So basically, the 20th century towards the end is the photon applications which emerged, and now 21st century will be now dominated by the photons and related applications, and that is why you are also seeing a lot of these photonic devices with very high speed transfer, data transfers. Also, all your mobiles, everything has these photonics related things, and these will become more and more advanced. And you will also start getting the quantum effects, and that is where even the quantum part, I mean, quantum computation, quantum communication, all these things are coming up, and these are not possible without the photons. So that has given rise, just like electrons gave rise to electronics, photons gave rise to photonics. So basically, photonics, what cutting metals, wood, drilling, micro machining, welding, engraving, etc., data processing, thin film development, where Professor Pinto has done a very great amount of work. So I will talk about that also. And then you have lithography and time resolved phenomena. So which is what we do at the last part. Laser surgery of the eye. This is Professor Dr. Rangaswamy Srinivasan from IBM Research Lab, who basically won the President's Medal. He was the first person in the world to initiate this. Then you also have these lasers in material processing, which was CO2 laser invention, and you can see Professor C.K.N. Patel, Chandra Kumar Narayan Bhai Patel from Bell Labs. You can see there he is standing next to this CO2 laser, and this was his little old. Now he's about 90 plus. And you can see these lasers and cutting and drilling. This is the same CO2 laser which is being used for cutting and drilling, and you can do a lot of fine such things in micro machining and diamond cut. So Surat has a big industry for that, and these are all the laser engravings and all. This is also used for writing the on the CDs or DVDs, and you can see some of you may have already seen the series, then going to DVDs, and then going to Blu-rays. Writing. So what has happened is basically the CDs used 780 nanometer red laser. So was the spot size of the laser, and that is why the size of the dots were quite big. Then it went to 650 nanometer red laser. Then the size reduced because the spot size also reduced. And when it went to this blue ray, which is 405 nanometer blue laser, the size became spot size became too small, and as a result you could actually make much more compact data writing. So this is how the ACM of these things look. So normally what happens when there is a laser material interaction, so once within few femtoseconds you have photon absorption, and then you have these delocalized phonon modes, and you also have these excited local harmonic modes, and the stress confinement of this is less. I mean, so if your uh, laser pulse width or the time duration of your pulse is much smaller than uh, the overall transmission of this shock wave, then you have basically very delocalized things within phonon modes, and the lattice does not get much disturbed. But once these phonon modes or these local excited things start getting settled, that means you now the entire energy is being passed on to the lattice, and this happens over a nanosecond. So if your laser pulse is of the nanosecond widths, then you are likely to disturb the entire lattice, and then you will have equilibration of these phonon states. You can have relaxed local modes, and if you keep pushing it further, is likely to melt or vaporize the material, and that is what leads to the plume formation and expansion of this laser plume. So basically that material just gets ablated and then it gets deposited on the other thing. So this is what was done by Professor Pinto, and he's one of the leading experts on this laser deposition of these thin films, and he did it during the superconductor days. And so this is how the laser plume looks once you give a shot, and then this is where the target is, where the substrate is, where the film is getting deposited on this. So you have direct solid to gas transformation. So many of these things happen, and you can do this. So you can also ask Professor Pinto about this technology. Then you have the kind of work that was done in our laboratory by Professor Venugopal Achanta. He is now the currently director of NPL, New Delhi. That's where I'm actually visiting because we have a conference tomorrow morning. So he has used these lasers for nano patterning, and you can actually do these nano patterns, and they will have a different kind of angular resolution, and you can also look at several of these photonic bands, which I'll explain to you. And he uses these kind of different structures. You have a quartz, you have a gold, and then you have a dielectric. So you have a dielectric metal dielectric kind of structures, and then you can change the properties of the uh, you know the transmission and all those things. So, of course, here I am giving you this as an example of lasers for nano patterning, and this is also part of the nanophotonics. You also have lasers for second harmonic generation, and you can see that you can generate second harmonic. So, if you you can either put 800 nanometers and then generate second harmonic, which is coming at 400 nanometers. So basically, this is a red light, and then that is getting converted directly into a blue light. Similarly, you can use an amplifier laser and put this light, focus it in say quartz or something like that, and that actually generates huge amount of different frequencies. So this is called as a white light generation, and it's a huge band of light that comes out. So basically, these are all the nonlinear crystals that you use. The most popular ones are KTP and KDP. That is what I think you are more familiar with. And one uses this nonlinear phenomenon to generate white light continuum. Now you have these different types of spectroscopy based on this. So either you have the incident light hitting the sample, then you can either look at transmitted light or reflected light or whatever is getting emitted or whatever amount that is getting absorbed here. So based on that, you either have absorption spectroscopy, transmission spectroscopy, reflection spectroscopy, or fluorescence spectroscopy. So there are different things one can study, and each one of these will give you a different information regarding this. So how does this work? So first, most important thing is the Heisenberg concentrated principle. So you use a pulse laser. So if you use a shorter and shorter time pulse, the shorter you do it in time, the broader it becomes in the spectrum. So that means it will have much more frequencies in it. So for example, if I use 800 nanometer wavelength, so which is centered at the 800 nanometer, then it will have a certain width. So if this is like 100 femtosecond, then this width will be something like 10 nanometer. So if this becomes 10 femtosecond, then this will become 100 nanometer width. So 800 will have spread over 750 to 850 nanometer wavelengths. So all those will be present in the pulse. Or if my pulse becomes say 1 picosecond width, that is which is quite broad, then in wavelength it becomes narrow, so it may become narrow to say 1 nanometer or something like that from 10 nanometers. So this basically is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and this also tells you the resolution of the your experiment. So if you want to do time resolved spectroscopy, you put this incident light pulse, and then you also have this pump pulse. So the pump pulse actually creates large carriers and starts these phenomena, and then with the another part of and using this, we for a single crystal we have looked at excitonic evolutions, and we can also use this for looking at how the pulses go and how the time resolved things work out. One can actually study a lot of these things, and you can actually also see these vibrations which are taking place, and these phonon vibrations you can have a look at, and this is how it sees as a function of time, and you can take the Fourier transforms and observe this. So where are we going? So we have been using these lasers, and they are going to penetrate more and more of our lives, and it's going to be great time ahead for these lasers. And now that brings us to next part, which is the metamaterials. Now, metamaterials which do not exist in nature, which are completely artificial, are called these metamaterials. Of course, there are some people who may not like this nomenclature. They call it these are frequency selective surfaces or something. But nowadays, the metamaterials is the word which is now more or less accepted. And you can see that this is how the structure of a metamaterial will look, and definitely you know that this is not possible to have it in, naturally. And you can people initially made these materials to show this in the gigahertz regime, but one can do this in different frequency regimes. So if you do it in terahertz, or if you do it in visible, then it will become part of nanophotonic metamaterials. Otherwise, these are called photonic metamaterials. So what kind of phenomena that you can do with this? So you know that there's a normal refraction. If you put this rod in a glass, and then you pour water, you can see that there is a certain change in the because of the refraction. But you can also this is a positive refraction, which is what we see normally. But you can also have a negative refraction where this entire thing will be completely put in the opposite direction. So the bending of light can be backwards. So based on this, you can have different things. So you have air to dielectric interface. So you have light coming in here and going away. So based on this, there are various conditions. So epsilon can be less than 0, mu can be greater than 0. There will be no transmission. And you have plasma and fine wire structures can do this. If your mu is positive but epsilon is greater than 0, these are all conventional materials, and here in this case the light will get transmitted inside, and n will be given as root of epsilon mu. This is our standard materials, all of you are familiar with. Now if the mu is negative, then what you can do is your epsilon is negative, mu is negative. In that case, you have n which is negative, and therefore you have metamaterials where you have negative refraction that is taking place. While if your epsilon is greater than 0 but mu is less than 0, then you have macrostructure, magnets and split rings. And in this case also there is no transmission, but you still have a different phenomena. So Vasilyukov was first predicted this negative index metamaterial in 1964. So just to give you some thought for this, so what I want you to think about is what happens if you put some object in the path of light beam. What would you expect to happen, or what happens if we shine light on periodic structures like gratings? Some of you may be familiar with this. And what is it that gives light a particular color, or what is this band gap, etc. And why can't we see an atom with optical microscope, or can we replace electrons with photons directly? So all these things you can just think about, and you will see that diffraction limited things will stop. Just hold on. There is, I need to see this. Sorry about that disturbance, because now I have to pick up a call just to ensure that I'm not losing out on that. So now, if we take this slide to the nano world, that is where nanophotonics is. What we do? So in the microscopy, we can we see objects which are smaller than the wavelength of light, or whether we can control the optical properties such that you can couple light to pass through a hole which is smaller than, or the structures which are smaller than the wavelength of that light, and whether we can control the nanomaterial properties, and whether we can manipulate this light using emission, propagation, absorption, using different kinds of structures. So in nature, these things actually happen, and you will see that all of you are familiar with the peacock feather, and some of us may have learned it as maybe because of some chemicals or something, but it is not the case. So if you look at these things under the electron microscope, you will see that they are all having different kind of periodic structures under this electron microscope, and you will see that basically it's the white light that passes through this and it getting filtered, and that is why you have these very vivid nice colors which are coming up. And you can also see this in the butterfly wings, and these are also having different kind of structures, periodic structures, which are part of this. So these are all visible under the electron microscope, and these are 3D dimensional structure. So all these will now lead you to, this is all part of these nanophotonic structures, and you may wonder what this is all about. And this is where the idea of photonic crystal comes in, which was first formulated by Professor Eli Ablanovic and Professor Sajeev John. Sajeev John is from Kerala. He's well settled in Canada now. He's a professor of photonics. And Sajeev John is the first one to come up with this idea, and then it was of course followed by Eli Ablanovic. He was working in the Bell Labs, and there he made this first 3D photonic crystal and tried to transmit gigahertz through it, and then he showed there is a photonic band gap. So just with electrons waves in crystals, you also have electromagnetic waves in photonic crystals. So just is one to one. So you can have reciprocal space, Brillouin zone, dispersion relations, Bloch wave functions, photonic band gaps, effective mass, Fano singularities, everything. So I'll show you here one-to-one correspondence. So just like in this proper solid, you have electronic band gap with the holes and electron band. And here also you have photonic band. So this is also the band gap. These are the states which are not allowed by the, not allowed for electrons to take. So electrons cannot have energies which are lying between this forbidden region. So that's why it is called electronic band gap. Similarly, for the photons are not allowed to have certain of these states in the photonic band gap crystal, and that what it means is that those frequencies will not pass through in this. So this is what is the beauty of this. So the same way you have periodic structure of atoms, which is like 3D or 2D, which you are all familiar with, and these gives you very specific properties of the electronic wave functions. You have the same thing for the materials, but now instead of here the sizes and charges and electrons, here you have refractive index, the main thing. So you can have 1D photonic crystals where you have all these layers which are in 1D, as you see the cross section. Then you can also have 2D sections where you can have it in two parts, along X and along Y, and then you can also have 3D periodic structures. So if this is a miniature part, in nano, then you have nanophotonic structures. Otherwise, you have in general photonic structures. So this was, of course, done by in the dynamical theory of X-ray diffraction in 1914. In close analogy of that, we have now currently the forbidden gap with common overlap of 4-5 steradian of space. So the major difference here between this dynamical theory of X-ray diffraction and this is that it allows to be large. In 2 upon n1 is allowed to be large, much greater than 2, and it also allow include electromagnetic wave polarization, which is not there in the dynamical theory of X-ray diffraction. So now you may wonder that how do we, create even defects in these photonic crystals or these photonic structures. So you can have different elements put in. So if you want to just put one point defect, you can have just one element different in that periodic lattice, or you can have the entire line of things which will give a line defect, or you can have near the end of the crystal, so which will be called a surface defect. So you can have different types of defects in these. And using these, of course, these are all simulations that you can actually figure out that if you confine light in the center, then it will have different kinds of modes. And then depending on these modes, propagation, you can confine the certain fields of frequencies and certain fields will be allowed. And based on this, Professor Gopal had developed this. So now you can see here, this is a periodic array of all these holes which are put into a dielectric, and you can see that some of these hole shapes are quite different. Say, look at this P, B, Q, and O part, and you will see that they are the R sizes are different, P sizes are different, B sizes are different, and Q sizes are different. So once you input the light from one of these ends into this kind of periodic structure, these periodic structures behave differently. They have a certain modes which allows, but because of these gaps and these are different shaped, you know, holes or gold parts, you will see that if you put light along the Z, you will see that there are only certain light propagations are possible. So for example, here you see only one type of light that is getting passed through along this, and only when you change its polarization or something, you will see that it will start moving in the upper direction. Here also there is some light is getting attenuated here, and lot of that particular light is getting passed through, etc., for different TM and TE polarizations. So why this happens is mainly because you will now wonder that what is this weird structure looking at. So what this is basically acting is like a frequency selective beam splitter or something like that. It is only or polarization dependent beam splitter, which is allowing one specific frequency polar and one specific polarization to pass through along these, and otherwise it allows certain things to pass through along these. So a lot of such interesting things one can do, and this is just one of the small examples where Professor Gopal had put one quantum dot, and then he wanted to see a selective emission from that. So this kind of structure you can build around single quantum dot and two studies. Now one can extend these ideas also if you want to really transmit this through different fibers or something for communication. So for that, what you use what is known as the photonic crystal fiber, which was first made possible by Professor P.H.J. Russell. And then what he did was very simple. He basically just took 1 mm capillary pure silica, put it in the, he took all of the, he put a stack of all of these together. And then he made a complete bunch of these. And again, the same idea. Now you have, the 1D getting extended into a fiber-like thing. So you can now put in different types of things. I mean, either a high density, high index fiber here, or low index fiber here, or you remove that with some defect or put in some biorefringent cover or some such thing. And basically with this bunch of tubes and rods, you basically put it in the furnace, pass it through, and then you take it out on the other side. So now you will see that it reduces the size, and it also brings it into, the ratios can be as small as almost of the order of 10,000. And then you can actually, if you have some kind of a defect in the band, then once you transmit the light, you will see that the certain band is completely avoided, and only one particular, say, omega naught will be transmitted through, and you can see that color that is passing through the center core of this. So how do you do this kind of modeling? So for this, there are a lot of computing solutions which are available on the computer, and these are actually uh, very pervasive in modern technology, information technology, and all that. So what you do is basically you create these different structures, and why this is advantageous is because you can just do it on the computer first. You try to optimize this, and you can evaluate the performance of all of these designs. And since this is just being done on computer, there are no experimental costs. You don't have to manufacture anything and test it out. You just have to keep on optimizing the particular design, and then you will see graphically what is the property that you are looking for. So this can lead to the determination of coupling, interaction, etc., and you can optimize your design. And for this, what you have to do is, there are these commercially available softwares which will actually solve the refractive index combinations for you, and this is a very heavy computational thing. And nowadays computing power is enough, so each of these institutes can have clusters of these PCs where they can do this uh, you know computation. So some of you are quite familiar with these softwares. So I will also give the list of all these. So one of the examples is the, say, optical ring resonator notch filter. So suppose you want to design such a thing, you don't have to manufacture anything first. First, you just design it on the computer. Ensure that for one particular combination of the diameter and the wavelength and the width and everything, that you actually see a wave getting confined into a circle, which is almost like a whispering gallery mode kind of thing. So such a coupling takes place on the computer. You optimize those widths and everything, and then you only directly fabricate that particular item. So that saves you a lot of time and effort. And same thing for, say, hexagonal grating if you want to make. I'll also talk about some of these designs, nanophotonic designs that we have done in the domain. I will speak about terahertz. So that time, these now here these grating cells, hexagonal grating cells, which are being done, they are basically having protruding semi hemispheres, and basically hemispheres, and these scattering coefficients are very different for them. So you can actually optimize these by just making several of these designs. And nowadays, though, people are also using artificial intelligence to just do it. I mean, you just tell me, I want certain such a structure spectra, and this is what the hexagonal structure is. You just go and optimize the heights and this and all that, and then the computer just keeps doing it day and night. You don't have to worry. And after 1 or 2, 3 or few days, he will just tell you, okay, this is what may be the optimal design. So you just take those parameters and just take one full run on the thing and see that, okay, you are getting what you wanted, and then you just fabricate that. So basically you have designing all these materials on computer. So the same thing you can do it with the waves that you don't want you make that material such that the waves which are incident on it will basically pass through this on the other side exactly the way you wanted, and this will actually make that particular item invisible to the incident light. So one can do such things on the computer using, now this is the software which is called COMSOL, which can do many of these things. And one can optimize these structures on this. We heavily use this console in our laboratory for optimizing our structures, and then we only fabricate those structures which are we have optimized. So that's all. So normally you can begin with a single antenna radiation pattern. So you can just have one single part and you will see that this is how the emitted pattern looks like. And this becomes very important for us because we actually deal with a lot of these dipoles. So using this, we have also designed monochromators, etc. And one of our student Ravi Kesharwani now, he has now joined Ayuka. So he did this complete design for ISRO, and we showed them this, and they were very happy with our design and very compact monochromator. There are several computing modeling softwares. So COMSOL is the one which we use, but I think people use CST microwave. I think you people may be using that. Then there is this high frequency solver, this HFSS, numerical. Numerical is used for optical domain things. Then you have RSOF, JCM Suits, SCUF, EM, MIT OpenWare, and DD-SCAT. I have not used the last three. The COMSOL I know we use extensively. CST and all that I know that students use it from IIT, so that's why I know HFSS and CST. Numerical and RSOF, we have these softwares. Professor Bhopal's students, they use it. I have not used it personally, but these are quite powerful computational modeling softwares. And why it is so important is because in your colleges, if you don't have resources, at least computing resources, a lot of people have, you can use these and optimize these designs, and actual fabrication can be done final. And let me also tell you that the whole world is now moving towards this computational material designs, etc. So now your materials are getting designed on computer first, and then only they are getting basically transmitted. So you basically optimize your entire design of that material on computer, and then only you have manufacture that particular design. That's also, that saves you a lot of time, and it is very efficient. So we have also done this some work with Professor Pinto around the whispering gallery mode. So I already spoke about these. One can also do this in the nano photonic part, but we have done it in our terahertz part. So where we have done is basically we have brought in one particular WGMR close to the waveguide, where the light is passing through, the terahertz light is passing through, and then that light gets coupled to this, and then it starts moving around, and there is a small analyte that is put along the what you call the equatorial plane, and it's a very small tiny analyte part, and you can actually see this is how the actual design is. And this is where the small ball, which is about 2 mm in diameter, which is put very close to the fiber, and then the light actually gets coupled here, and then it actually sees a change in the modes depending on any change in the refractive index material which is present there. So this was done by Anushri and Himanshu, and they were actually able to see there was a big change in the WGMR. So this is the pure red WGMR part, and as you go on putting in this analyte matrix, which is like 0% or 2.5% or 5%, you can actually see a change in the frequency because of the change in the refractivity. So it's a very, very sensitive measurement technique, and we are actually able to detect this with very, very high resolution of like a few megahertz. And so this kind of things we did it a long time back with Professor Pinto. And there is also this COMSOL simulation which is being done to with these college students who can do these kind of things now. And we were able to see certain modes in some of these structures that they designed. So, coming back to this nanophotonics, what is actually the nanophotonics that we all talk about, etc., and what are its applications? So, basically, these are the optical interactions and the excitation dynamics. So, these are all size dependent. That's what you saw. And there are different novel optical resonances you get nano control of these excitation dynamics, and you can do manipulation of light propagation. And you also have nanoscopic field enhancements. So these are quite important for us when we do terahertz part also. And currently the main applications are in solar energy, information technology, environmental monitoring, and health. And the most easiest example, or the first examples, are from these medieval ages. And you can see this is a stained glass window in Notre Dame in Paris, Notre Dame Church in Paris. It got burnt a few years back. And you can see these are all the metallic glasses where you see these different structures. And you have these nanophotonics, which is in the marketplace. So you have nanoparticle UV absorbers, sunscreen lotions. You have semiconductor lasers, which are like pointers, printers, players, etc. So they all use quantum well lasers, which you already we talked about. Then you have solid state lasers for chemical sensing. You have quantum cascade lasers are coming close to the terahertz region, and infrared and near infrared region. And then you have nanoplasmonic home pregnancy kits, which are biological applications. So basically, nanophotonics has a lot of these different things, like with the different quantum dot size, you have different colors, you have dendrimers for controlling the excitation dynamics, you have plasmonic arrays for field enhancements. So once you light, once you excite these with light, you will see that there is a certain region between them which gets hugely enhanced with the light field. And then you of course have photonic crystals, arrays, and all that. So you can see here the simulation will tell you how this is more light modes are getting split into two different parts, which is otherwise not possible to have it with your conventional beam splitters or mirrors or something. So this is a very, very unique kind of thing that you can achieve. And then of course you can do nano trapping of subwavelength particles and manipulate them, or catch the sails and move them and all that. So you can do many, many such things. And with this, you have this portable renewable energy devices, which take the solar energy and control, generate the heat or electricity. And you also have thermoelectrics, where just by heating it can generate electrical current. So a lot of these activities are right now going on with advancement of nanomaterials, perovskite materials, and all those things. So old ones are like colloidal quantum dots and high-electric oxides, core shell semiconductors, etc. But now people are also getting into perovskite things, and these are some of the latest perovskite things. So nanotechnology has been very much useful for catching or for the efficient harvesting of the solar energy. Normally these lead selenium based thing, but lead and selenium are very toxic to the environment. That's why people are trying to find out if there are any other ways of getting this. So a lot of work is going on. Nature is, of course, way ahead of us in terms of light harvesting. So our eye is a very great detector of photons. We can actually detect 1 or 2 photons if we are that much sensitive. We also see photosynthesis taking place in plants. Even today, also we can't do artificial photosynthesis. A lot of work is going on towards this, and you also have this vitamin D photosynthesis and all that. So right now you are all familiar with digital finger pulse oximeter and all that, how these things work. So during the pandemic, everybody is familiar with this, but normally these have been used in the hospitals to monitor oxygen and all that. So all these things have become possible because of the advancement in the photonics technologies. And that brings us also to this another part, which is I will touch up briefly, which was by Professor Gopal on the particle of these plasmons. So plasmons is nothing but just the oscillations of electrons or charge carriers or ions, whatever you call it, which propagate on the surface when the light is incident. And the, this helps actually couple the light properly. So if you just have a normal, you know, huge plain gold, you will actually get a reflection very easily. But if you have a different kind of a structure, then it is very likely that the response is going to be quite different. And the applications of plasmonic are quite numerous in the whole subject of biology, chemistry, metamaterials, microscopy, nanophotonics, etc. And you have, uh, you know, uh, these applications in physics for enhancing material properties, what is being used now, and also in the sensing for the chemicals and biomolecule things. And other parts, people have been using these for sub-wavelength imaging and making negative index metamaterials and making sub-wavelength optical components. So, for example, you can also have now flat lenses which are coming up pretty soon. Your cameras will become as flat as your credit card. So, I mean, don't get surprised. But this is all possible because of these, plasmonic and those structures where you can manipulate light with just 2D structures. So all the things that I talked about will be used in making such kind of things. And people are already taking patents on this. So pretty soon you will see that, you know, the credit card thing lenses will come. Flat lenses, these are called flat lenses and all that. But of course, I will not talk much about that here. So this is just a quick glance for you. So how this can be used in the sensing. So if you see that if there is a plane part, you will see that there is a certain peak coming for refractive index of 1.32. If there is a slight change in the refractive index, there is quite a bit of movement in the spectral region, and that is basically the lambda of the light that is getting incident. Uh, are you able to see now? Screen is not being shared. Okay. Are you able to now see the screen? Where I was on the applications of Plasmonic? Yeah. Okay. So now it's visible. My voice is also audible. Okay, sir. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah, sorry once again because of these glitches coming in the thing. So now I just wanted to ask for 1 minute break. So if you have any questions, I can take. Otherwise, we will shift to the terahertz part of its applications. So I'll just wait for a minute. So Professor Jain or Professor Manjunath, who is coordinating, if there are there any questions from the audience, or shall I start?
You can proceed, sir, with the terahertz. If the
I can
audience,
proceed with the terahertz?
yes,
Okay.
sir. If they have any questions, then at the end they can ask you, sir, during.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I will begin with the terahertz. So first of all, what is terahertz? So all of you are familiar with the electronics and photonics in the electromagnetic spectrum. And now what we have is basically the uh, just hold on. Are you seeing the screen?
Sir, visible.
Hello?
Visible,
Hi,
sir.
visible.
Visible.
Okay. So you are all familiar with electronics. You are all familiar with photonics. So basically, our gadgets are coming up to gigahertz, and in the photonics, you have all these visible which runs into petahertz, and terahertz lies exactly in the middle of this band, and you have 1 terahertz equal to 1 picosecond, which is like 300 micrometer wavelength, and that is like 4.1 millielectron volt, which those of you who are familiar with the wave numbers, it is 33 wave numbers. So you can see that this part of the electromagnetic spectrum has remained unexplored, and there have been a lot of applications of these. So you can see that there is a, one can do the imaging of these. So here is an image of a person who is carrying this dagger in the hidden inside the newspaper, and you can actually catch that using this. You will also have applications in the dental or medical part, where you can see the inside part of the dental thing. And there are so many different chemicals like RDX, HMX, PTN or TNT, which have very specific spectra, and these are all very visible in the terahertz. So therefore, all the agencies which are law enforcement agencies are all behind this for the development of high power terahertz. So what are the advantages of terahertz? So there are many large molecules which have rotational and vibrational energy levels in this range. So these can be used for like frequency fingerprinting of this. Just like we have fingerprint very unique to a human being, you can also have frequencies, certain set of frequencies which are very unique to the given molecule. So that way you will get very nice thing. And these terahertz can penetrate through materials where optical beams cannot. So therefore you can actually do the imaging of the humans, and you can actually see what they are carrying inside, and you can actually see that the light is passing through the clothes, and you can see what is inside. However, it cannot pass through any water filled bodies, and that's why this is not harmful to the body. It is not penetrating inside like x-rays, so you can do surface scanning of this. So this is also being used for detection of skin cancer and other things. So the basic idea is, if you have high intensity terahertz radiation, then you can do what is known as a uh, standoff detection, or you can use this to study water rich and other materials. You can image them in unique frequency range, and you can do many other things. So these are some of this unique spectra of, say, RDX, TNT, HMX, and P. These are all the explosives, and they have very specific lines which are present in this. So one can also do imaging of this. So here is the image, the visible. The visible, nothing is visible actually. But if you do the terahertz scan, then you can actually see that the person is hiding this in the The person is hiding into just 1 minute. Huh? There is some noise. I hope you are all able to see my thing. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello?
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 Hello? Yes, sir. Yeah, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Working fine.
So here is the terahertz image of the items which are hidden, and this is the actual photograph of the items which are hidden in these shoes. So one can do such kind of imaging. And here is the person who is wearing all these clothes, but he is hiding one dagger here and pistol and everything, so which is very easily visible. In TIFR, we did this imaging of these leaves, and you can see along the edge there is no water, so that is actually coming out as white. And wherever there is a water heavy absorption, you can see those as lines, water lines. This is of course little modified figure. But this is basically you can do this image, and these leaves are put inside a brown envelope. So you really don't know what is inside that brown envelope, but once you scan it, you can actually see the uh, image. And here also is a 500 rupee note, and you can see Mahatma Gandhi's picture coming in into this, and very clearly visible. Uh, Picture. So this is, you can say, the first watermark picture of Mahatma Gandhi ji. And this is of course old note prior to 2015 or 6 whatever, before demonetization. So let me now talk about the terahertz sources, and out of which the most popular ones that we use are the photoconducting terahertz sources. And why I'm choosing this is because this is where we have used the ideas of nanophotonics and many of those photonic crystal things which I explained to you in my previous part. And the basic idea is very simple. First, that you have to generate using an incident photon electron and hole pairs. Now, once you have electron and hole pairs which are created, you have to apply an electric field and accelerate them. So once you apply electric field and accelerate them, then you have these go away from each other. And once you have accelerating charge carriers that emits the terahertz pulse, and this basically radiated photon is the terahertz photon. And you can take a semi-insulating gallium arsenide piece, you can put these two electrodes, bias them with voltage, and then put this incident 10 or 100 femtosecond pulse in the center. So you generate electron hole carriers, you apply field, accelerate them, and then generate the terahertz pulse. Now the way you generate, this is the actual source. This is how it looks like, that we have created in our laboratory. So what are the things that it is dependent upon? So it is dependent upon this current which is changing in time, so which is basically dependent on the number of electrons and holes which are created as a function of time. And then you have electric charge, mobility, and applied field. So the radiated terahertz radiation is basically the rate of change of this current, and that is basically given as dN by dt. So basically what you have to monitor is the rate of change of this carrier generation and its decay. So that is what is the key, and that is what will decide what kind of frequency components that you will have in your pulse. Now this is very much dependent on the material that you choose. So we choose gallium arsenide because it has a band gap of 1.42. It has a very high dielectric breakdown, about 400 kilovolt per centimeter, and the material that we have procured from abroad in open market is it has electron mobility of 8500 and a hole of mobility of 400 roughly. And the carrier lifetime, we have measured it between 50 to 100 picosecond. However, if you have to have a very high quality sources or some such thing, then the most popular thing is the low temperature gallium arsenide, which are actually material which is restricted for sale to India because of its dual purpose applications, because this can be used as a fast switch. So that's why this material is heavily controlled in the first world to be sent to third world countries like India. Low temperature gallium arsenide has less than 1 picosecond carrier lifetime, and as a result, you can have large amount of high frequency components in the terahertz region, in the terahertz pulse that you create. So, if you look at different simulations in gallium arsenide with different kind of electric field applications, you will see that if you have a shorter and shorter carrier lifetime, and if you apply very high electric field, then actually you can drive this into the negative velocity region, or because of where you apply higher electric field, but the carriers are no longer accelerated, but they are deaccelerated like that. So these you are actually driving these into a non-equilibrium states. So we basically, of course, don't get into that directly, but we are trying to have this controlled by carrier lifetime. So what are the things that you can modify in this entire design? So you can modify bulk, you can modify the electrodes. The electrodes can have interdigitated plasmonic or different length structures, or you can also modify the surface of these. So here is the list of all the different materials I have listed here. So out of this, the LT gas has the shortest carrier lifetime, but it has little lower mobility. But all other parameters are almost same as the semi-insulating gallium arsenide. Semi-insulating gallium arsenide has carrier lifetime, which we measured was 50 to 100, and mobility, of course, is of the orders of thousands. So you need to reduce the carrier lifetimes in this. So for this, what we did some implantation, artificial implantation in this, and reduce the carrier lifetime. And then we made these sources, and you can see that uh, the non-irradiated uh, sources and the illuminated sources, you will see that the devices which we made, they actually drew milliamperes of current as we increase the voltage. Now this is a huge amount of current that is getting dissipated, that leads to heating of the device and can destroy the device in no time. While when we irradiated them with different dosages like 10 raised to 14 or something like that, and then we illuminated them. So you can see that the dark current, when it was not, the device was not illuminated, it had 6 orders of lower current for the same voltage. While when we illuminated it, it was still drawing 2 orders of magnitude less current than the unirradiated one. So this shows that the devices can actually dissipate much less power and can go to much higher voltage. And you can actually see that the unirradiated sources got destroyed in less than 30 volts, while our irradiated devices could work beyond 150 up to 200, up to 150, 160 volts. So this way we have increased the robustness of our devices. Then you can also modify the electrodes. So you can make these electrodes interdigitated. So interdigitated means you can have alternate electrodes created. So before that, we first decided that we will have, right now we are focusing it to a point, whether we can focus it into a line. So when we focused it into a line, we could increase the terahertz emission almost 10 folds. So this shows that now we are in, exciting much larger area. So as a result, it's much more efficient generation taking place in that. Then we can make these interdigitated ones with a micro lens array and a cylindrical array. And you can see that with the cylindrical array, we were able to increase the thing even further tenfold compared to the circular micro lens array. These are very difficult experiments, but they were performed by Abhishek, one of my former students. Now he's doing postdoc in ZDR, Germany. So he did that, and then we came to the other thing that okay, these were all plain electrodes. So now using these plasmonic and nanophotonic ideas, can we modify the plane part itself? So what we did was the plane electrode was made into a like comb like thing. So this comb, of course, is the separation between these two elements is like 200 nanometer or zero point 0.2 micron, which is very, very small, and you need to have electron beam lithography and clean room infrastructure to carry this out. And by doing that, we made two different types of structures. So the whole idea was that we wanted to also get rid of these microlens arrays because it was becoming very difficult to align them. So if you remove those and if you can have much larger area, then you have what is known as a large area emitters of the terahertz. So here are the large area emitters of the terahertz, and these are all interdigitated. That you can see that there are each alternate arm is there in the from left and right side, and then you have these comb like structure, very fine structures made over each of these electrodes. Now here in the SP, which is called this symmetric plasmonic, so basically you have these comb structures on both sides, above and below this, here also above and below this, so this is all symmetric. And I is interdigitated, and PCA is photoconducting antenna. So SP means symmetric plasmonic interdigitated photoconducting antenna, and AP is anti symmetric plasmonic interdigitated photoconducting antenna. So why this is anti-symmetric is because this is only present on one side. So here you can see a negative and a positive side, just one thing is there. We have made this comb structure, while here it is on both sides. Now what happens is the very tricky thing that you have the electric field going from positive negative to positive here, and again sorry, positive to negative here, and then here negative to positive, and again positive to negative. And so basically you electric field direction is going in one way, and then there is an opposition direction like that. However, this when you put the entire, when you illuminate this entire region with a light laser, hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, one of the
Hello, can you
participants
hear
had
me?
turned on his microphone.
Sorry. Sorry, no problem.
Fine.
So here
Yeah.
what happens is if you eliminate this entire area, what will happen is you will have a positive electric going, you will have positive going electric field and negative going electric field. Just hold on, I just had to take this. Sorry, there was a call. So then what you can do is basically in this here you have positive going, negative going, positive going, negative going like this. So what happens is we found that because of this presence of these plasmonic structures, you have almost 10 times higher terahertz generation compared to just the plain side. So now here what will happen is here you will have +1 -1 or +10 -10 +10 -10 kind of generation, while here you will have +10 minus sorry +10 -1 +10 -1, like +10 -1 +10 -1 kind of structure. So here if you don't use the micro lenses, you can still have almost 9-10 times higher generation, while here the generation would be less because the electric fields emitted will keep cancelling each other. And you can actually see that here very clearly that for different polarizations of the incident light, the terahertz generation is also less, and terahertz generation is also much less depending on the structures that. So the large area anti-symmetric structure that is above AP structure, that is the highest light is getting incident. So if you just have a plain surface like what we had, then you are generating carrier only along this line. But when you have like 3 micron, I'm sorry, generate carriers in much more in 3 dimension here. Here also not all 3 directions, 1, 2, 3 sides, and as a result you have effectively larger amount of carriers which are getting generated, and then you can generate higher and higher. Of course, there is certain limit up to which only you can go, but Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you're audible now.
Okay, sorry.
Fine.
So I'll just
The presentation
start.
is not been displayed, sir.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you were seeing this one when it got switched off, or you were seeing this one? Hello?
The same one, I guess.
No,
So
when
just show me the previous.
it
Just show me
got
the previous
disconnected,
slides.
you were seeing this one.
Just
Okay. So what I was saying here was we tried out different. Hello?
yes, sir. The same one. Yes. Next. Sir.
This was the slide. Okay.
Yeah. What next?
Yeah.
From what next we can start?
Okay, so basically we tried out these different designs to optimize. So here what we did was we made this array of these circles, circular holes. So basically you have a semi-insulating gallium arsenide, which is like a dielectric, and then you have air, which is the hole in air that we have made in here. So if you make this periodic structure, this is the AFM of that, and this is the actual design of our device. You can see these two electrodes, and there is an excitation in the center, and then right next to it is another antenna. So what we did was basically we made these bow tie antennas, and we tried to study the structure. So basically the idea is this 800 nanometer will get confined much more in this region, so that we have much more efficient coupling because of these plasmonic structures. And you could see that the if we looked at the currents that these devices took, we found that they are almost of the same order. You can see whether the bias was parallel to the perm polarization, or the bias was perpendicular to perm polarization. The current drawns were the same. So we were a bit surprised that how this happens. But the terahertz is a transient phenomenon, and it has nothing to do with these currents. So the overall average is the pulse current, and that is where is the most important part. So when we looked at the terahertz emitted power, when the E bias was parallel to the terahertz, that is this polarization of the 800 was parallel to the bias field, then we had higher terahertz emission than when we had horizontal polarization of the terahertz. So the way we explain this, we of course did a lot of simulations of COMSOL and all that, but the simplest explanation that we found was this. So when you have this E bias along the and the holes, and the polarization of the light is parallel to that, the hotspots which get created, or the field which gets confined between these holes. While when you have these electric field perpendicular to the bias, the electric field hotspots are actually along this clean side. So what happens is when you apply an electric field, the carriers quickly get removed in these defects, because this is the hole which is getting which we have created. While here these carriers actually can get transported through without any defects or getting captured. So as a result, you have a much different terahertz emissions in the two cases. So this is the actual simulation part of it, and we could actually see how much is the carrier concentration and all these things. So all this was done using the COMSOL, and then we looked at the results of this surface CO2 with a specific thickness, so as to avoid reflection coming in. So this also increased its reflectivity. It reduced its reflectivity and confined it even more. Then we also had air dielectric design with the hexagon, and for one specific structural orientation, we could actually get much higher emission of that. And you could see that one at 60 degrees, we had a highest emission for that. So this again actually proved that there is quite a bit of localization of these photocarriers, and and one can do that and have the transport. So again, this was also simulated, and we showed that. And then we came to the most difficult part of this. So instead of the air, now we decided to put in the metal in that, and we also modified the structure a bit. And this is by far the most difficult thing, because these whole structures are also quite small, about 100 or 120 nanometer kind of thing, and you had to have this kind of an array. And when we did this excitation with this, we could actually also measure the carrier lifetime, and carrier lifetime also we were able to reduce it from unpatterned to the patterned one, from 48 to 31. And then we were also able to see how much is the current. The current was not very much different, but when we looked at the terahertz emission, it was quite a bit different, and it was also broader than the one which was unpatterned. So this patterning actually showed us that we can modify these things in two ways. You can broaden the terahertz width, and you can also increase the emission efficiency. So these are all the simulations that we had done to optimize these structures, and then only we fabricated this. So we also have this terahertz generation by photo mixing. So where you have two frequencies which you mix together in this region, and then you generate beating frequency, which actually is the terahertz beating frequency, and this is used for doing very high resolution terahertz spectroscopy. So we can go tune it with megahertz resolution from like 100 gigahertz to down to 1200 gigahertz. So our sources that we made here with just semi-insulating gallium arsenide, we could only go up to 600-700 gigahertz, but with implanted ones, we could go up to 1100 gigahertz. And we also made these photoconducting antennas using this. So if you for photoconducting antenna is as simple as that, same as the source. So between the two electrodes, instead of biasing them, you just measure the current. So initially there are no carriers. So to generate carriers, you put the pulse light, then you generate carriers, but then there is no electric field. So for that you need the terahertz. So in the when the positive going or negative going terahertz will actually move the carriers either towards upper electrode or towards lower electrode, and based on that you can actually have different types of direct sampling detector or integrating detector. So if you have very short carrier lifetimes, then what you sample, the current is basically the convolution integral of this n response of the device versus the electric field. And if n is like a delta function, Dirac delta function, then you get current exactly like the electric field. So this is how it is shown. So this is the green part which is shown as a integral that we calculate. So you can see that each of these part will continue to move, and then this is how you detect it in our setup that we built. And we also modeled it with pulse generation and rate of change of this n. And this is the pulse that was incident. So we measured it first with zinc telluride, and then we used that value in this integral here. And then the n part was calculated using this decay part, and then we put it numerically and solved this integral, and then we generated these current profiles, and these are the measured and the current profiles. We have also worked on, with Professor Dattagupta and Professor Gopal on this controlling of dark quadruple motion Dolman structures. So here these are different structures which we first modeled it on computer using COMSOL, and you can actually create these quadrupoles, and you can also use this to destroy the dipole that gets present there. And as a result, you can actually open up a window in a otherwise blocked region. So this is called electromagnetically induced transparency, and this way you can also make these different types of metamaterials. So we have made different metamaterials with different frequency selective surfaces. So these are called a terahertz band polarizer or terahertz cut wire metamaterial and all that. And now we have built a very unique machine, which is called a near field scanning terahertz microscope, only of its kind in the country and very few in the world. So here what you do is basically here these measurements are these spectra is basically measured in the uh, far field, as they call it. That is far away. The detector is far away from the sample, and source is also far away from the sample. But these kind of things that you say, ki, how did I arrive at this? So this is all done by computational console and those kinds of softwares which give you the distribution of electric fields. So, so these are all theoretical. So we wanted to do this actual measurements of this, and therefore we used this probe tip and right next to the sample, right where the actual pattern is, because these patterns are in microns. So one has to actually put the tip very close together and do this. So using this, we were able to sense the field, and you can see the time evolution of this for a single hole periodic structure. And you will see that this is how the pulse modes are coming. And now you will see this is where the main pulse has come, and these are the different modes which are coming at different times, and you can see them very clearly. I hope this animation is visible to all of you. And then this is basically done in time, but one can also do this in the frequency domain. Basically, you have to take the Fourier transform of this time evolution, but this is happening in picoseconds, several tens of picoseconds kind of thing. And different modes keep coming in at different times. So now if you take a Fourier transform of this, you can also see how the frequency movement is taking place. And here is the frequency movement, and you can see that one specific frequency is coming out of that particular part, and you can see that different modes keep coming in from this single hole, and this is what I was talking about. These kinds of things are now, this is a quadrupole and higher modes which keep coming, and these kind of things are not possible to see otherwise other than the computing. So this opens up a completely new field for us, and those of you who are interested can also come up with the designs, and we can do it. So now those of you who are interested in opportunities after masters or whatever in photonics, so there are a lot of further studies one can do, like MTech, PhDs in IITs, or PhDs in nanophotonics, nano optics, physics, optical engineering, etc. There are large institutes abroad which are available. You of course one can also do project assistant positions in national, international funded projects in IITs, universities, research institutes, and try to focus on learning electrodynamics and quantum mechanics. So these are the key things. And then nano fabrication and different characterization tools. There are many positions, of course, are available in other laboratories. There are many companies now who can hire people like 3M, Global Foundries, and Bharat Electronics, and all that. So there's a lot of scope for people doing photonics. So it's not the end of the thing. So you can tell your students all these things, and these are our research interests. Basically, our near field scanning terahertz microscope. This is working. We also do terahertz waveguide, fiber designs. We also work on terahertz whispering gallery modes. And we are actually right now making different crystals for generation and detection. And then we have also started optical pump terahertz probe studies of these materials, and we would like to get into terahertz material studies under high terahertz field and under magnetic field. And eventually, I want to wish to do this deep nanoscopy of the terahertz, but that's a very future part. these are all the students who work on different times on different things. So currently, Dhanashri is and Ajinkya, these are the two ones. Basically, Ajinkya is running all these NSTM and all other things, and Dhanashri works on the devices. So pretty soon she will start giving results. And these are all RNA postdoc, and all these people have on this side have all gone abroad. These three also have left the lab now. They have gone abroad. So yeah, so I would give credit to all of them for their work. And Gajendra is our scientific officer who basically helps us in electronics and other things. So thank you very much, and I hope I gave you some flavor of whatever things. And sorry for all the interruptions in between that we had. So now the talk is open for